Hi, everyone, and welcome to the MagManager podcast. Today, we're talking about a subject that every magazine publisher has an opinion on: cold calling. Is it old-fashioned? Does it still work? Or is it something we've all become a bit scared of? I'm delighted to be joined by Lee Kenny today. Lee has over 20 years of marketing and sales experience and manages 10 magazines. He's built his business by picking up the phone and having conversations with people. So I think we're going to learn a lot today. Lee, tell us a bit about your background. How did you get into publishing?
Yeah. Hi, man. Hi, everybody. So it started really. I was uh, left school quite early. Ended up going into the travel industry by accident almost.
Okay.
Which I was very lucky. It was a company called Lund Poly at the time, so we had nice red and white striped shirts. But they were the market leader, so the training was very good. The seven steps of influencing and the seven steps of overcoming. So a bit
Okay.
like IBM or Yellow Pages, it had a really strong kind of apprenticeship foundation. After doing that for about 10 years, I kind of hooked up with another company who I'd met the chap in travel, but he decided to go into television home shopping in the early days or infomercials. So if you've seen QVC
Mm.
in the
Yeah.
UK, so we kind of, I was taken on as sales and marketing director for that company, and we had infomercials or 30-minute commercials on television in America, on Sky in the UK,
Wow.
and then also over in Australia. And it was the same thing, really. You were in a different room, a different place. So we picked up a lot of skills, or I picked up a lot of experience from there. And then that kind of carried on in marketing and different forms of television until we had an opportunity to kind of go out on our own, really, as a marketing agency, which I did that. So before Facebook, before, back then, marketing was either on television, radio, direct mail. AOL wasn't really a great platform at that time for doing email marketing,
Okay.
or eBay. eBay was where a lot of people were selling things. So we helped a lot of clients do that. And alongside that, Liz, my wife, who's the editor and co-owner of the business, we were doing a few things in the community, with the charitable foundations and different organisations. And we had a call from a mutual friend who was a bookkeeper for a local magazine called the Skirket Green Directory. And it was an old MyMag kind of franchise. And this was about 8, 9 years ago. And Tracy had set it up. She got 6,000, I think, copies, a little A5, magazine. And she just, she was ready. I think her son was going to university and was like, right, I'm looking for a new owner, but it has to be somebody in the community. So I talked to Liz. Liz had, I say retired. She doesn't like me saying that, but she was staying at home to look after the kids and they'd now gone to school. So even though she was a nurse's background, we said, hey, Liz, do you fancy taking this on? We were users of the magazine. Every month it came in, we read it, we put it on
Yeah.
the shelf. If
Okay.
we needed a plumber, we got it. So actually, Liz started editing that magazine whilst I was still running our other businesses, which were marketing and websites, etc. And then after a couple of years, we started to say, well, what if we went a little bit bigger? What if we had two magazines? What if we had four? Oh, there's a magazine over here for sale. So that took us to six, and then eight, and now we're up to 10. So about just over maybe a year and a half ago, I decided to come back into the business full time as kind of MD and in charge of kind of strategy and sales. And yeah, we worked together to build a little team. So an unintentional fall into local publishing, you might say.
Yeah. And it's probably great because 10 magazines is quite a lot of work.
It is. I mean, it's not quite 10 a lot, the multiple of 10, but there are certain things that don't work. So, having a part-time, as we have done forever, a 20-hour a week salesperson who is lovely, just can't cope with the volume, the leads, the prospects, the renewals, the lapsed customers. It's just an impossibility. It's a real treadmill. So hence, why we've had to look at different forms of marketing. And this topic in particular is people sometimes have a negative stigma around cold calling.
Yeah, they do.
But any magazine that's been around 20 years only started and only flourished when that owner 20 years ago or 15 years ago, when they literally either picked up the phone or walked into a sandwich shop or a butcher's or a joiner's and said,
Yeah,
"Hey, I've got this magazine. You should think about being in it." So there won't be a person who's launched more than 5 years ago who hasn't had to do some cold calling to get it to a minimum level, whether that's face to face on the doorstep or picking up a phone. Obviously, at the moment, there's lots of competitors from social media, from Instagram, from lead generation, but very often the easiest thing to do is not the most effective. The hardest thing is where you'll kind of get probably most results because there's less competition, the harder it is.
yeah, exactly. But why do you think people are uncomfortable with sales and doing cold calling?
I think a couple of reasons. Just an opinion would be, one is most people didn't get into this type of industry to sell. They do it
Mm,
because they love their community. They really love writing content. They really love bringing
yeah,
people together. But they've probably got a negative, in America, they call it the aluminum siding kind of salesperson, the real shonky salesperson, or maybe it's a bit unfair now because we've all got double glazing people in our magazines, but a double glazing salesperson, they remember those things in the 80s where mum and dad maybe got ripped off by, I don't know, the Everest window company.
yeah,
Other window
yeah,
companies are available. So, and that carries forward. It carries forward into people's perceptions for, I don't like selling. But of course, they're not really selling. They're trying to help, another business grow and get
yeah,
regular leads so
exactly.
that they can go. So I think there's a connotation around sales, especially around sometimes creative folk. It's no different to newspapers. You had
No,
an editorial staff and then you had a sales staff, and never the twain should meet. It was we've got to protect the editorial integrity, and the salespeople were like, "Well, can we just do this?" And we're in a bit more of a blended environment. The other obvious thing is people don't like rejection. Why
no,
would we go
no.
headlong into something where we're going to get 99 no's out of 100?
Yeah, exactly,
Life
exactly.
life feels too short.
Yeah. Do you think cold calling can be learned, or do you think people are really naturally good at it?
I think really good sales techniques can be taught, but I think you've got to have a comfortability in talking to people, and that part I think is a little innate. Uh, if six people, including myself, who've never played the piano before, were suddenly given exactly the same lessons, exactly the same tutor, on exactly the same days in 6 weeks, some people will be up here, other people will be down there. It's just the way of things is that no matter how much you try, so everybody can sell, but can they sell to a level of where they'll be happy? Because that plays a big part. You
Yeah,
have to have a good mindset and mentality because if you're not, nobody wants to do anything from a place of fear or dread.
yeah,
It's only until it gets painful, and that's maybe the magazines drop from, I don't know, 32 pages to 16 that, suddenly, something inside has to change. But even that's a forced change. So I think everybody can learn, absolutely. And there are some little techniques and training, but we also have to remember that we're not trying to change people in the magazine industry to really, financial instrument, complex, products. If you just take it for what it is, which is a really, really good value, really nice way of introducing people to a community, then if you start from that base, you can probably then improve your skills. So there are some people that, they never talk to anybody, on the phone at all. They,
yeah,
they will find it more challenging.
yeah, yeah. And I speak to people like that. So cold calling, do you think does that still generate business for you?
It does. It does. It's, the downside is it's not the velocity that you would want, or the velocity you might get from, from an email, for example. You might send an email to 10,000 people and get 20 calls inbound. Those are all going to be much easier. So even though it's a lower percentage, there's an ability with sheer volume. You can't make 100,000 calls at once to get that 20, but you can make the emails. So I think that it's we had one last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. Now bear in mind the magazine has been in existence for nearly 20 years, and we've had the magazine for 8. A funeral director down the road that has never done business with us, never engaged with us in all that time, suddenly a cold call was like, you've rung at the perfect time. He's been thinking about direct cremations, of all things, really quite annoyed and irked at the way the national companies were handling, the process, as well as the pricing. So decided to do something about it. We just happened to call him that morning. And it's not a big, I think it's £7,500 he booked that day. In bookings. So that never would have happened on social media or on email. It might have happened if he'd have come forward to us. But again, so it can work. I think as long as you approach it in a consistent manner to your publication, as long as you are doing a few of the small things right, and that might be using a local dial number. It might be picking people at the right times of day. But I know you'll ask me for some tips later, so we'll kind of go. But there's a place for it. You just have to have the capacity.
Yeah. And in 8 years that you've been running the magazine, you and Liz have been running, do you see that cold calling? Do you think that's changed a lot and how you approach it?
I think the amount of people that pick up the phone now is a little bit different. So I think we've had to be a lot more structured. What we've tended to find, there was a spell probably 3 or 4 years ago where the sales rep might have been handling renewals. A lot of dopamine hit there, because we all know that if somebody's been in a magazine 6 months, they're 9 out of 10 will say yes the next time around. Yeah. So it's a real little ego stroke, for a salesperson. As a business owner, it's not so great, because of course anybody could have made that call. You don't necessarily need your star salesperson to be making those. You want them to be introducing new people into the business. And I would say that, a few years ago, when social media wasn't quite as prolific now. So if I rewind, my marketing agency back in the day was one of the first Facebook marketers. And if you posted something for free on your pages, 96 out of 100 people would see it, because it was in the early days. So it was very, very impactful. They might not respond, but they would see it.
Yeah.
At the moment, that's down to probably less than 1%.
I can imagine.
So it means it's harder. So a few years ago, it was probably at 4, 5, 6%. So a salesperson could spend a lot of time on social media, doing a lot of outreach, and they'd get that 3 sales in a month, and they'd say, this is proof that it works. But of course, you might have spent £2,500 on a salesperson to generate £450 worth. But because it gave them that validation, it wasn't necessarily a commercial proposition. It was a dopamine. So at the moment, we're finding that's getting less effective. People are posting their business in a Facebook group, and it's saying, hey, would you like to post it in these other 100 groups at the same time at the click of a button? Well, that's just making it harder to stand out, not easier.
Yeah.
So the other major difference we've probably seen in phones is we are seeing a little bit at the moment of the screening, the Apple screening calls. So that is before it rings, it says, hi, tell me who's calling. I talked to the guys this morning. We're still at around 10% of those calls. But I was talking to another publisher last week who estimated that 1 in 4 or 25% of those calls were being call screened currently. But again, I don't think we've anything to fear. It's if we're relevant, if we're testing. One of the advantages of having a call center doing this just for community magazines is we might be making, between the staff, 700 calls in a day. So it means we can A/B test or test alternatives, to that message or to how we open, we've got a lot of data very quickly. If I was using Carrie, one of our internal salespeople, on 20 hours a week, that data might take 4 or 5 weeks to accumulate, whereas here it might be 2 days. So then we can say, great, let's try hi versus hello. Let's try mention the company versus not. Let's try it. So there's lots of different things we can test.
Yeah.
To then see what's the improvement.
And I also think I think it's an advantage for publishers that social media has got really busy. It has got really busy. So if you're advertising before, and you're quite right, 4 or 5 years ago, if you're advertising in social media, you were getting Facebook, you were getting good results, but they're not getting those results anymore. And that's why print has come back around, I think. I think people are doing well in publishing because people are happy to run an advert in there because they're seen and they're visual and they're in a magazine. And if you produce a really good magazine, you make it sticky, so there's plenty of local content in there, interesting stuff, and people want, or you're in a busy area and you're looking for a plumber or a window person or something, having that magazine through your door kind of cuts through that traffic and think, oh, right, okay, I'll ring that person up. So I think we've benefited from busy social media side of things. Definitely.
And I think it's an addition. It shouldn't be an either or, much in the same way as print. We're selling advertising, we're selling eyeballs and distribution. We're not, I haven't found many publishers around the country that are saying, and don't use social and don't use networking and don't use social media. I think they all come together as a nice package.
I agree. Yeah, you do a bit of everything, don't you? And what does your prospecting process look like? How much work do you put into that prospecting list?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the publication, of course. So if you've got a very much lifestyle publication that isn't interested in plumbers, then, the research is a little bit different into associated categories. There are a number of places with public data. As a company ourselves, we tend not to buy in. And the main reason is as soon as that data is available to buy, maybe anything up to 100 companies could be trying to attempt that list in sequential order at the same time. I agree. Everything you hear about, oh my gosh, I've had 10 calls today trying to pitch me utility warehouse, SEO, graphic design, websites, you name it. Everybody's on that same list. So we have a look at available data sources. We tend to then match against who we've got in the system. So, we'll have a look and say, does this company already exist as a prospect? Are they lapsed? And there is value in keep going back to the same data. Of course, if you've been on MagManager for 5 years, I don't know how long you've been going, Mandy. How long has MagManager been?
We've been going for about 11, 12 years.
11, 12. So if you put every lead in over the last 12 years, from every networking event, you've probably got enough data to be starting with. The challenge most people do is they want to say the same message every time. So, hi, are you interested in coming in? Hi, we haven't spoken before. Do you want to come in? Hi. Instead of just taking a moment, a breath and just saying, actually, trying to do the same thing over and over again. Well, I don't know its attributes. It could be Einstein, that definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, we see that all the time, and it might be something as simple as somebody's ringing at 10 o'clock every morning. Well, maybe the person's always busy at 10 and it should be 11, or it should be 2 in the afternoon, or 5, or so you can say hello to Liz in the back corner there. She won't hear us. She's in the kitchen. So it again, the same sales, it could be just, hey, I noticed such and such has opened a store and it made me think of you.
Yes.
That's a great little opening. Just checking in. How are things? Or, hi, I know you weren't looking for adverts, but I noticed you sponsored the under 12. We've got a great sponsorship opportunity here. Well, let's be honest, we're still selling them advertising. But they don't want, there isn't a business in the country wants to buy advertising.
No.
Not big, not small. There is 0 people in the UK want to buy an advert. A lot of them are enlightened enough to know they need to buy adverts because they need leads coming through, and then is it relevant? So as long as we understand that, all people really want is results. They want a bit of peace of mind. They want to grow, hopefully a little more than last year. Hopefully they'll want to grow and take more people on. So yeah, that prospective we have a look over. I mean, because we are in a field of what I would term quite low ticket items. So whether it's £400 a page, £600 a page, £200, £100 a page, depending where you are, we're not selling £200,000 infrastructure.
No.
So the lead qualification you might do with the head of aerospace at Boeing is probably not what we need to do with Todd's Butchers in Skirkett Green.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It's like, hi, I've been running your financials. What?
And I also think, because I belong, I don't know about you, probably do, but I belong to like all my local Facebook groups, and they all chat away. And I use that, and I think people use that for information as well, gathering. So if you ring someone up and say, I know my local window people, they've just recently launched, I don't know, some new bifold doors or something, or composite doors or something. It's quite good that you can go in with a little bit of knowledge from that, because you've kind of, hi, I noticed you've got some, new bifold doors out, and then chat about it. Or I've recently gone into, you've got a new manufacturing whatever place, So I think that gives you a little bit of knowledge. So you're not just saying, oh, hi, do you want to buy an advert in my magazine?
Yeah.
Kind of, oh, great, I see you doing that, and maybe that is do you find that approach works?
Yeah, and you hit on a really good point, I think, and almost back to your last question, which is what's changed. I think a significant thing that's changed is sometimes you have to be prepared to talk to somebody 7, 8, 9 times.
Yeah.
Maybe even 20. But it's having the discipline, through using actions on MagManager, and saying, great, I'm gonna not forget to call this person. I'm not just gonna call them when I've got a few spare pages, but a real structured format of follow-up.
Absolutely.
And what did I say last time? Okay. Oh, well, your dog was, in for an operation, or you went to Barbados. So being able to reference that, I think it just builds that rapport and keeps things a little lighter and warmer. They know why you're calling. They know you want to sell them something, but they'll be a lot more forgiving if you look like you care.
Yeah. And I always think, and I've known lots of people, because I do a lot of, calls and things, and I've had a lot of experience in it. I think no means, it might be no today, but it won't be no tomorrow. You can't just sort of like say, and my son does a lot. My son sells corporate travel, and he and I, it's funny, I don't know whether you find this, but particularly sometimes of the year, it's not so good. And he'll ring me up in January. I know he'll ring me up in January and say, oh, Mum, it's such hard work. I can't sell anything,
Yeah.
And I'll say, I know. And it's pouring down the rain. It's freezing cold. Do you find that it does matter what time of year it is?
Well, having been a travel agent and heard every excuse under the book, people aren't coming in because it's too hot. People aren't coming in because it's too cold. People are coming in because it's raining. Oh, no, they don't want to come. Really, yes, there are some seasonal quirks. If 12% of people are on holiday from the 26th, August, well, let's be honest, that period between Christmas and New Year, a lot of manufacturers that they aren't working. So of course there'll be a season element, but I don't think it's as wide as people say. I mean, it was absolutely chucking it down last week, raining cats and dogs, whatever you want to say. I came in, I'm like, a day to be reaching roofers. There ain't a roofer in there working at the moment. So as a cold call salesperson, perfect time.
Yeah.
Perfect time to be ringing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it could all vary.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. Right. We kind of got all of the other thing, where were we? Right. I suppose we've covered how important relationship building is. So we've talked about social media and how important it is understanding. And like you say, making notes, remembering that they were in the Bahamas or Bermuda, whatever, on holiday last time we spoke. Those are really important. So the next time you chat, or like you say, your dog is unwell and you've had to rush off to the vets. First thing is, how's the dog? Is the dog better? Those are all kind of building relationships. And I think those are really important. What's your 5 cold calling tips? What would you say with the 5 kind of, if you were giving somebody some tips now, what would your top
Yeah.
tips be?
No, good. I'm pleased you asked. Yeah, it's. I mean, the first one might say. I mean, all these are going to sound obvious. I'm really sorry. There's no
No,
magic bullet,
no.
but they are. They're kind of true, and the fact that they're so simple means that sometimes people don't do them. But the number one thing is you've got to be agreeable. If you go expecting on that call that it's going to be a bit of a battle, the last 10 people have said social media, or I always use Google or that, and you're thinking, well, I've got to convince this person, which usually dot dot dot, that means I've got to convince this person they're wrong. Yeah, that you shouldn't be using that, you should use me. And that is a really awkward standpoint to come from, because I don't know about you, but as a general stereotypical male, I don't react very well to being told I'm wrong. I might retreat even when I am wrong, by the way. Don't tell Liz that. But being agreeable and saying, yeah, totally get it, totally understand, because they're expecting a fight as well. I say a fight, they're expecting some friction. So if you can reduce that friction and have that mindset of, yeah, I'm just going to be the nicest person to talk to. When I decided to set the call center up, not a blatant pitch, but I told the call center manager, I said, I want to go back to like I don't know whether it was the 40s, and you had those rooms of people with heads. Hi, how can I take your call? How can I direct? They were so upbeat and so friendly that it's really difficult to shut somebody down when they've got enthusiasm. So the same is true here. If you're on the phone and they say, I'm really sorry to bother you, and I know you're probably really busy, and I'm really sorry. Well, that's not going to start off a great conversation, because
No.
they don't want that either. So I would say being agreeable, that's the first thing. So getting yourself in a mindset of being positive, and that's not la. Doesn't mean, hey, every call is going to convert, but you're doing a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Number two, I think you've got to understand it's a 1% or even less than 1% game. So, in terms of conversions, we try to look around a lot for external call centers, a lot for people who'd maybe sold advertising in the past. And the one thing we realize is a lot of people struggle because they think, well, I made 3 hours worth of calls today, which probably for most people is 15 to 20 calls. It's just enough to get a good enough sample of data. So when you understand that, you might not be able to do 200 in a day. It might take you a week if you're doing it yourself. But just stay focused on that, because then you're monitoring, how many media kits have you sent out, how many good conversations have you had. Because if you focus on those inputs, as long as you're having enough positive inputs, the outputs will come, the sales. So again, but you have to understand that that's what you're up against. An inbound call, you might close 3 out of 4 or 5 out of 8. It's apples and oranges. So just, again, it's a little bit mindset. Just make sure that's in the mentality. Number 3, I would say is you've got to get used to probing. So you've got to get used, when somebody says, no, thanks, I'm not interested. Most people will end the call there. Okay, yeah, sorry to bother you, thank you. They might say, hey, is it worth me checking back with you another time? Good, better,
Yeah.
But best might be, okay, is that because you don't believe in advertising, or you're just so stacked out for work?
Yeah. Okay.
And you'd be quiet. And then they will start to do it. Is it like you just don't like me? Or is you just don't believe it? There's lots of different ways depending on how confident you are. Okay, wonderful. Just so we don't bug you, over and over again, do you mind if I just find out a little more, why? Are you doing advertising elsewhere? So it's quite open, but it's probing and just having that conversation, because you might learn some brilliant stuff. There's a really good, somebody talked about a sales process called Feel, Felt, Found, which is, I know how you feel, such and such felt the same way, or I felt the same way. But actually, the big reveal, what we found is this. So, hey, you're on Google AdWords, brilliant, amazing. You'd be amazed how many people aren't. And that is one of the quickest ways to get sales. What a lot of people have found, though, is that magazines is that instead of paying £12 a click, not a sale, but a click on Google, that using some of that money to maybe place a half-page ad at 100, what's that, 8 clicks, that they've got a much, much better chance. And they found that actually alongside Google or alongside social or alongside networking and referrals, that just really fills that little bit of quiet
Yeah.
time. So again, that's something that you can start to use. It's everything to avoid saying, "Oh, you're using Google. God, it's expensive, don't you know?"
Yeah.
You've just told them they're wrong. They might know it's expensive and they might know it's not getting a return, but that's not our job, isn't to go and diss their media. Our job is to say, "Great, how can we help?" You
Yeah.
know, if we had this little conversation, and maybe, you know, to your point, no just means not right now, not never. You know, that actually when you've run your campaign, you've tested your results and you think, okay, I was happy spending £300 a month on Google, but it didn't do anything. Where am I now? And if you're building that relationship, you're having a good conversation, you have a pleasing personality, hopefully, you know, as long as you follow up because of your actions, because they won't remember you after one phone call.
No.
I think number 4 is you have to book in the time. Cold calls do not happen by accident. And if it's a loose wish to do, oh God, I've got to do some cold calls. Whatever your system is, whether it's a day timer, whether it's online, whether it's blocking out calendars, block out time and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But don't, if you've not done it in 10 years, don't say I'm going to spend all Tuesday doing cold calls. Just spend half an hour.
Yes.
Yeah, just spend an hour, right now. Just make 10 calls, just make one call.
Yeah.
But book in the time and keep it consistent, and understanding it's a 1% gain, you might need to book that out. But be flexible around your time. I'm going to say this, I like going to the gym. I've only been once in like a few months, but one of the challenges, I like going really early in the morning. So if I don't remember to go early in the morning, the chance of me doing it in the evening is very slim. Cold calls are the same thing. If it's the 27th thing on your list to do, behind emptying the waste basket in your home office, and let me just check the ink, and let me check if I've got enough paper clips, anything to avoid making cold calls, then you just, get started at a time that'll be good for you. And I've put down here, number 5 would be most sales do happen after that 9th contact. And I'm not advocating ringing somebody 9 times in a day, but over a course and a period of time, and it could be as high as 20. That really has changed. That's changed from 3 or 4 call attempts before. And I think if am I allowed a bonus 6th for people?
Yeah, go on and do the bonus 6.
Yeah, which I think it really works well cold calling after you've sent maybe a mass email going out.
Yes.
So if you've sent an email
right.
out on MagManager or MailChimp, and then the next day they get a call, they might not even remember seeing your email. I'm sure it's very memorable, but they might not quite. But subconsciously they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I was, I did see something about that."
Yeah.
And again, it's just a nice segue, a nice follow-up. Hey, you probably saw the email from yesterday that talked about, this thing, just checking in with how you're going. And then you can start to have that, that conversation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. That's really useful. And then quick fire round now.
Oh, right.
Best time of day to make calls?
All different. Unless, construction is like 7:30 in the morning. Before they get the gang of lads in and out. Restaurants are, not in busy lunch or evening service, but probably somewhere between 5 and 6 p.m. Otherwise, you've just got to rotate and try.
Okay. I know somebody used to always say the best time to contact builders was on a Friday afternoon using texting. They always said yes then.
Yeah, well, after a pint,
Yes.
having knocked off at 1 o'clock. So then, hey, I'm all for that.
Okay. Coffee or tea before calling a session?
Coffee for me, all the time.
Yeah. One phrase you never use?
Really, using Google? There might be another one, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
really.
Okay. And biggest mistake salespeople make?
Not listening.
Okay.
They're really good talkers, but And sometimes cold calling can hurt this because they're under orders. They've got to make so many calls in a day,
Yeah.
and they've got to make so many contacts that if it's not a fine balance, it can just be a next, as opposed to just digging that little bit deeper. Lots of sales have been turned from a no in a not very persuasive environment of just listening,
Yeah.
and that could be as simple as we've all rung somebody that we can tell they're empty in the car. There's a child on their arm. There's somebody
Yeah.
beeping a horn. It doesn't matter how good a salesperson you are. That's probably not a good time.
No.
And
No.
recognizing that and having the awareness up front, just say, it sounds like you're having, a bit of a time there.
Yeah.
Is there a better time? Sometimes I say, no, you're okay. Just give me a second. Or they say, do you know what? Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare. Just can
Yeah,
be in
for
a
sure.
group. Yeah.
Yeah. And phone or email?
Oh, both. Both really. I don't think one can do the work of the other. I think they work really well in tandem. But again, hierarchy, if you can see somebody face to face, see them. If not, give them a call. If not, text, maybe a LinkedIn message, then you'd be down at email.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for that. And I think that's been really great. I think you've given some brilliant advice there, Lee. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. If someone is listening and owns a magazine and hates cold calling, what's the one piece of advice would you give them?
Just call me or text me if you don't like calling. No, I've got, and I should say here, just for transparency, I do not like cold calling. In fact,
Does anybody?
it is not it's just under cold networking in a room of 3,000 people,
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
don't know anybody. But I'm fortunate that we've got a team that do like it. Yeah. So I class myself as a good salesperson. I think I can sell my magazines better than anybody, but I'm not wired to make
Mm.
150 calls in a day, or
No.
make a fit
No.
for. So you have to don't beat yourself up. If you, because there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of things tied around. I really should be, running at 100 miles an hour, and I see this person on Instagram looks like they're really crushing it, and don't beat yourself up. I couldn't do what our guys do in the call center. Do I think I'm a better salesperson? Possibly, but you just have to be wired differently to have that volume and then reset and go again. So I think, in all seriousness, be nice to yourself, be kind, try it, just try making 10 calls a day for a
Mm.
little bit, see whether you feel like it's for you. 7 of those 10 won't answer, Mandy. So they're
No.
only
No.
having to have
No.
3
Yeah.
conversations.
Exactly.
And then if it is something that you're interested in exploring, of course, we're happy to talk to people, walk them through how it would work, how technically, and we've got a number of clients on, and I'm pleased to say they're all using MagManager. The ones that weren't using MagManager, we've encouraged on because we think it's a really good system to be looking, to keep that future touch points in place.
Yeah. And I think, we've all done it, and cold calling's tough. And I think you're right. There are some people who just don't mind and are happy to pick up the phone call to 20 or 30 people. And there are others of us who are probably better at closing,
Yeah.
speak to somebody and then move it on to somebody else, and that, so it's having somebody to do those hard grind the phone. But, Lee, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. And I know listeners will take away plenty of really useful ideas, and hopefully be a bit more confident to pick up the phone.
Well,
Thank you so
thank you for
much.
having us. Yeah,
No,
really, really
really.
pleased to
Yeah.
help.
So if you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to hear more conversations about growing a publishing business, keep an eye out for our future episodes from MagManager. But thanks, Lee. It's great to chat to you. Take care. Thanks for your time.
Well,